Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Excuse me. Our next panel isn't quite as cloak and dagger as the last one. I hope everyone got their cell phones back. But as Greg said, it is called All About Activism. You're going to hear from discussions with our guest panelists and myself about our experiences with activism and grassroots organizing at the Middle East Forum. We also have an attorney here who's going to talk about the legal and national security aspects of some of the work we also do here at the forum. This panel will build on some of the campaigns we've had at MEF Action, which is the latest project here at the Middle East Forum. It's a new project, but really it was established, excuse me. Yeah, so it's a new project, but it was established to help out our existing projects, our Islamist Watch, our Washington Project, and our Campus Watch project. And it's something that we've already gotten, we've already started making waves with MEF Action. For instance, we helped defeat 2 pieces of legislation from the last congressional cycle that were introduced by Representative Ilhan Omar. One of these you may have heard of. It was an Islamophobia envoy bill that was very controversial and unpopular. We did this by putting constituents in touch with their lawmakers. They sent thousands of letters saying that they opposed this legislation. We also recently led a delegation of Iranian Americans to the Ohio State Legislature. These were people who had lost loved ones from the Iran regime during the 1980s, and they were calling on Oberlin College, state legislators, to pressure Oberlin College to stop funding of Oberlin College until they fire one of their professors, Mohammad Jafar Mahalati. Okay, so those are some of the accomplishments we've had recently. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into inviting our panelists up here. Our first panelist is Enes Kanter Freedom. Enes, you can come on up. Mr. Freedom is a pro basketball star who played on 5 different NBA teams where he really established himself for being a dominant and consistent player. Some people may remember his record high 30 rebounds with the Portland Trail Blazers. But he's also an outspoken human rights activist who has become the voice of oppressed for people in Turkey, China, Iran, and other persecuted people around the world. He's been called a go-it-alone truth teller who is willing to sacrifice his career, his personal safety, and his very freedom in the name of calling out human rights abuses. Welcome, Enes Kanter Freedom.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Daniel Pickard. Daniel, you can come on up. Daniel Pickard counsels the Middle East Forum on national security-related matters and is the chair of international trade and national security practices at Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney here in Washington, D.C. He represents and advises clients on these matters, including economic sanctions, anti-boycott measures, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and the Foreign Agents Registration Act. He has a JD from Golden Gate University School of Law and a Master's of Law from the Georgetown Law Center. Welcome, Daniel Pickard. Okay, so we're going to jump right into questions. Enes, again, thank you for coming. I'd like to start with your childhood here.
Right.
You've mentioned before, you've shared stories about how as a child you grew up and were subjected to, children were taught to be anti-American and anti-Israel.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about these influences on your childhood and what it was like growing up with this type of indoctrination in Turkey?
Turkey was once a democratic, country before Erdogan, I will say. But, growing up, especially, east side of Turkey, if you're an elected official and if you want to be elected again, you do a couple things. The first thing you do, you attack America and you attack Israel. Unfortunately, the base is so uneducated, right? So the base is like, wow, look at our leader. He's standing tall against America. He's standing tall against Israel. So let's vote for him, you know? And people are using that. The politicians are using that. Whenever, I mean, I'm sure you guys seen it many times. Whenever one of those politicians on rallies in Turkey, they do attack and they do say some very crazy things about America and Israel and stuff. So I remember growing up, I was 9 years old. I went downstairs to play with my friends. And I remember I went downstairs and my friends, who are not even a teenager, were burning American flags. They were burning Israeli flags. And I'm like, guys, what are you doing? And they're like, well, that's what we seen on TV. And, you know, it was a huge propaganda. That's what we seen on TV. That's what we seen on newspaper. And they just keep telling us to just hate America and hate Israel. So they gave me a flag to burn it, actually. So they gave me a flag. They gave me a lighter. And they're like, I looked at it, right? And I threw it down. And I ran upstairs to my mom. I was like, Mom, you know, my friends are telling me to hate America. They're telling me to hate Israel. They tell me they're evil people. What do I do? My mom is like, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but do not hate anyone before you meet him. So I give a promise to my mom. I give a promise to my mom. And 8 years later, when I'm 17 years old, I came to America for the first time. And I remember, you know, hanging out with my teammates, and they try to have a conversation with me. I turned around and left the locker room because I was just so scared. I didn't know what to expect from them. I remember I had this Jewish friend who invited me to a Shabbat dinner. Obviously, I said no, you know. But then I remember the promise that I gave to my mom. I was like, you know what? I gotta do it because the promise. Anyway, so before I went to a Shabbat dinner, I called my Turkish friend who lives in America. I was like, if you don't hear from me for the next 2 hours, seriously, call the police. So I went to Shabbat, and it was so amazing, like the food, the culture, the music, the dances, like everything, the prayers, everything was so same. I'm like, so why do we hate people? You know, so when I was going back to my hotel, I started to my eyes started to tear up because there was so many, millions of kids in the Middle East are growing up anti-American, anti-Israel, and anti-Semitic, and anti-Christian just because of those hate speeches coming from this politicians. So that really broke my heart.
Thank you, Enes. So, you know, during your first 2 years in the league, it seems like you were focused all on your game, all on the profession. But you had an awakening moment where you said that you realized where your reach and platform could take you.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about that moment?
Of course. So like my first 2 years in the league, in NBA, all I care about, like every other NBA player, just play basketball and have fun with my teammates, you know? When I say have fun like an NBA player. So my third year in the league, there was a big corruption scandal happened in Turkey. President Erdogan and some of his family members were involved in it. And after that, a scandal came out. He started to put innocent people in jail. Police, prosecutors, judges. He started to go around and shutting down media outlets. And I was like, I don't care who you are. If you are fighting against the free media, I'm going to say something about it. So as an NBA player, I wasn't even educated about the situation. So I put a tweet out there. Because of the NBA platform, it became a conversation in United States and Turkey. And I was like, even one simple tweet can affect this much. From now on, I'm going to start pay attention about what's going on in my country more. So I started to study. You know, I remember my teammates were going out to bars and clubs, and they were inviting me. I was going back to my house. I was studying about what's going on in the Middle East, Turkey, Turkish politics, the relationship between America and Turkey and stuff. The more I studied, the more I realized the situation is really bad, because Turkey plays a very important role in Middle East and Europe, you know? So after that, the more I studied, the more the big media outlets started to give me a platform, and every time I say something, it was becoming a conversation, you know? So it was very difficult for me, because for an NBA player to talk about these issues was very tough, especially it's my second language, you know? but I'm glad I did it.
Thank you, Enes. Moving on to Dan. Dan, actually, your name came up in the last panel, so people have already had a means of introduction with you. But if you don't mind, describe some of the work that you do with the Middle East Forum.
Sure. So one of the curses of being an attorney is to err on the side of protecting confidentiality. So maybe more than talking about specific things that I've done with the forum, maybe I talk a little bit generally about my practice. Sure. So I'm the chair of the International Trade and National Security Practice. That encompasses a lot of territory. A significant part of my practice has to do with U.S. individuals and their access to classified information, what's called the Foreign Agent Registration Act, which is a law that I think we're going to be talking about a little bit more this morning, that requires agents in the United States who are acting on behalf of foreign sovereigns and others to register with the Department of Justice. And there are a variety of kind of national security concerns with that. I also advise in regard to U.S. export controls, how we regulate exporting defense goods and defense technologies to our allies and partners abroad. I also advise clients in regard to anti-boycott laws, the laws in the United States that prohibit U.S. persons from participating in the boycott of Israel and other countries, and a variety of other kind of niche-y national security laws, also having to do with international anti-bribery and other items of concern.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think some might wonder what a national security attorney is doing on a panel about activism, but I think it really comes down to the fact that MEF spends a great deal of time exposing foreign interference, whether it be from CARE or foreign regimes from the Middle East and North Africa. For instance, we've written extensively about groups like the Turkish-American National Steering Committee and the National Iranian-American Council. Both are suspected of acting as undercover lobbyists for these regimes. One of the few tools at the government's disposal for fighting foreign influence is a World War II era law, which you mentioned, FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Can you tell us about FARA and why the renewed government interest in it over the last few years?
Sure. So FARA was created in the 1930s because it became clear to Congress that Nazi agents had come into the United States, had started to covertly write letters to major U.S. newspapers advocating against U.S. involvement in World War II. And it became clear at that time that we didn't really have, we, the United States, didn't have any law that required agents who are not involved in espionage to register with the United States government. So they passed FARA. And FARA, in a nutshell, basically says it's a three-pronged test. If there's an agent in the United States acting on behalf of a foreign principal, pardon me, and who's involved in political or quasi-political activities, you have to register with the Department of Justice. And for decades, the law essentially was not enforced. To the extent that there were enforcement actions that you saw in the 70s and the 80s, it was really kind of a piling on offense in regard to KGB officers who had been detected. That one, you're involved in espionage, and two, you forgot to register with the United States government to let us know that you're involved in espionage. So you could make an argument that the law didn't have a whole lot of teeth. And then starting in 2015, 2016, a ton of attention starts to get drawn to FARA. The idea that there were a variety of foreign actors who are involved in overt political activities, activities attempting to change the perceptions of the American public, distributing money on behalf of foreign principals in the United States, and it became a significant concern, especially on Capitol Hill, when they had noticed that in 6 decades, there had essentially been a handful of prosecutions. So both as a result of an Inspector General report, attention on Capitol Hill, and just as importantly, reporters really bringing FARA issues front and center, a ton of attention is now being, a ton of resources are now being invested in the FARA unit, which sits in the National Security Division of Justice, to make sure that individuals or groups who are acting on behalf of foreign governments, foreign political parties in the United States, have to register with the Department of Justice. The idea being that both the US government and the American people benefit from that level of transparency.
Sure. So, speaking of the FARA unit, we have turned over, or at least attempted to turn over, evidence of potential foreign agents, foreign influence from other organizations before. And we've sort of been turned around or turned away from the FARA unit. They say that they can't accept evidence from outside institutions. They claim that they don't want to get involved with nonprofit wars. It seems one of the few ways that organizations are forced to register today is if they self-report. So my question to you would be, what can an activist or even just a concerned citizen do if they uncover evidence of what they believe is a foreign agent or foreign influence in the United States?
Sure. So the FARA registration unit's kind of public position is they're open to whistleblower complaints, that they will say publicly that a large part of how they become aware of there is self-reporting, and then there are also investigations that both come through the intelligence community, referred over to the FARA unit, as well as public reporting of it. The problem from kind of a track record perspective is that private parties walking in, making complaints in regard to, or making the registration unit aware of potential covert agents in the United States, covert in regard to their direction and control from a foreign principal, track record hasn't been phenomenal. But we've seen some successes if you can walk the registration unit through your evidence, and that's the message they keep on coming back to. You can't just walk in and tell us you've got a suspicion that this organization is really a front for that political organization. You've got to be able to give us evidence that shows not just that there's an affinity or an alignment of interests, but you have to show some type of direction or control, which can either be done through the money or requires maybe some more innovative approaches to show that type of relationship.
Sure. Back to Enes now. Of course, you have some personal experience dealing with foreign agents. It was the Turkish-American National Steering Committee was temporarily suspended from Twitter after they orchestrated a campaign of harassment against you, tried to blame you for the 2016 coup attempt in Turkey.
That was you?
Single-handedly.
Which, interesting.
So tell us, what do you know about this group, the Turkish-American National Steering Committee, and groups like it? Do they represent Turkish Americans?
Not really. They're like foreign agents, and I mean, I do remember that they're running against campaign anyone that goes against Turkish government, and I'm glad that I had the MBA platform. So no one really took them serious because they were blaming me for the coup attempt, which they're saying that I killed around 251 people. Yeah, as an NBA player, it's very shocking. Yeah, when I have a conversation with people on the Hill sometimes and stuff, so they're like, so they blame me for the coup attempt. I was like, yeah. They even start laughing and stuff. But the only thing is that they could become actually very dangerous because they do harass a lot of people on the streets, a lot of journalists actually. So especially in DC, there are so many journalists who escaped Turkey, who escaped pretty much a dictatorship, and now lives in America, lives in DC, and they are this people that was in that committee that just goes after them, and they try to take a video of them. They try to put them in a corner and ask him some very weird or tough questions and stuff, and they take that video and use it as a propaganda in Turkey. But they do not represent Turkish-Americans at all. Definitely not.
How do they threaten you?
How would they?
Email, physically? There's a person across you on the street? Give us a little insight.
Of course. So I remember, I'll actually give you a very good example. So I was playing for Boston Celtics, right? And me and one of my friends went to a mosque. And when we leave, I actually took a video. There is like a big evidence on the internet. You guys can go ahead and watch it. Before we leave the mosque, right? They came from the mosque and they were yelling and screaming to me and my teammate. And I remember my teammate first I thought they were fans. And he said, I saw the hate in their eyes, you know? And they were just yelling at us, harassing us and stuff. And it became actually huge news in America because like we have not done anything bad. So I remember, you know, FBI came to Boston Celtics to where we practice and stuff. They were asking us questions like, have you ever guys seen these guys? Or who are they work for and stuff? Just because there was nothing physical, they didn't get in trouble. But the FBI said if they ever like even touch you, let us know. Then you know they will be in trouble. So that's how they threaten us. You know.
And I want to encourage everybody, if you have questions, please, there's a notepad in front of you. You can write them down, pass them up. So just think of your questions as the discussions are ongoing. We'll try to take at least the last 10 or 15 minutes for audience questions, so thank you. Okay, Dan, back to you. One of MEF's recent campaigns involves going after a series of Turkish-American political action committees called the 10,000 Turks. This was a PAC that was established that seemed to take only money from either registered agents of Turkey or people that were suspected of being proxies of the Turkish government. They were involved in FBI investigations, for instance, and other foreign influence scandals. So despite this, all of what they did was completely legal as far as I understand. What are the prospects for more rigorous enforcement under FARA, and are there any legislative proposals being considered for this?
Sure. So, so we are in an increased enforcement environment for FARA. There are now criminal charges being brought against individuals, at least a couple per year. I wouldn't say that it is necessarily a particularly robust enforcement environment right now, but there are criminal investigations going on. There have been convictions for violations of FARA or related laws, but there is there's an awareness on the Hill that FARA needs more teeth, right? And I don't know how many of you live in DC. I practice just 2 blocks down. There are not a lot of things in this town where there is consensus on both sides of the aisle. You may have noticed. But the idea of having more enforcement of FARA has support on both sides. So it might surprise people to know that there are no civil penalties for violating FARA. So if you violate FARA, you can't get fined for it. The FARA registration unit itself doesn't have any subpoena authority. So if it believes that you may be an agent of a foreign principal and you have to register, they believe that you're supposed to register under the act, they send you a letter asking for information and ask that you pretty please respond. That is not typically how Department of Justice investigations are supposed to go. So there are a variety of bills on the Hill right now. One major champion of it is Senator Grassley, and it's got a variety of parts to it. And there's a bunch of different bills, but More funding for the unit. What they call Civil Investigative Demand Authority, which is just a very legalistic way of saying allowing them to issue administrative subpoenas to compel people to provide information, to start having civil fines for violations. So yeah, we're in an environment with a lot of people are paying more attention. I think the press is doing an admirable job in regard to bringing more of these issues to light. And I would not say that the Hill is moving at a lightning quick pace, but there are proposals that have been introduced and they're moving their way through. We're going to see some type of improvement to the statute. It's just a kind of a question of when and how much.
Thank you, Dan. So speaking of completely flouting FAIR's, regulations, the MEF played a role actually in the designation of Al Jazeera's online platform AJ Plus as a foreign agent of Qatar. AJ Plus since then has completely ignored the orders of the FAIR unit to register. And the Biden administration does not seem interested in enforcing it. So what are your predictions in regards to what the DOJ will do next year?
Okay, so with the disclaimer that my crystal ball is frequently cracked when it comes to kind of predicting what this and previous administrations are going to do, it is amazing. So there are criminal penalties under FARA, for including terms of imprisonment, for knowingly and willfully not registering. 2-3 years ago, DOJ put them on notice that you have to register under the Act, and they just haven't done so. And there has been press coverage, there's been a lot of outrage on the Hill. So frankly, as a guy who practices in this area, I would not be the type of attorney to say, DOJ has told you you must do something or else there's a chance you're going to jail. My advice typically would not be just ignore that. So prediction-wise, I would think that there's one of two things going on, or perhaps at the same time. I would not be surprised if there are ongoing negotiations in regard to, can we settle this somehow where DOJ gets half a loaf? They are a little reluctant to bring a criminal prosecution that touches on something that could be cast as a First Amendment right. That I don't think the Biden administration has got a huge appetite for criminally prosecuting something that could be claimed as infringing on a news outlet. On the other hand, I would not be surprised. There have been a lot of investments in regard to new FBI agents assigned to the FARA registration unit and new prosecutors in that it sits in counterintelligence and export control, CES, and national security. I would not be surprised if there is an ongoing criminal investigation, including potentially collection of evidence for charging. Something has got to break. The idea that it has gone on this long is troubling on numerous different levels.
Thank you, Dan. Back to Enes. Earlier this year, you were at an interfaith basketball camp in Vatican City.
Right.
When you received a call from the FBI, they warned you that you should head home immediately, they said, as the Turkish government had just issued a $500,000 bounty on you. What can you tell us about this?
So yeah, I'm sure you guys know that I don't play basketball anymore, unfortunately, because of China issues. That's another topic. But so what I do right now, I just go around the world and I organize basketball camps for kids, And I think it's an amazing tool to reach out to kids out there in the world. And whenever I organize a basketball camp, we bring, Muslims and Christians and Catholics and Jewish people, and I actually go around this the people that were in conflict with. So I remember I had a basketball camp between Armenians and and Turkish people. I had another basketball camp in Greece with Turks and Greeks. I had another basketball camp in Jerusalem with, Israelis and Palestinians. So it's an amazing tool to reach out to kids, because it doesn't matter the conflict, this and that, but you can, play basketball, and we leave all this conflict and war, whatever is going on, out of the court. So I remember I went to a Vatican, and I organized a basketball camp because I had a really good meeting with the Pope. And the cardinals around the Pope and like, hey, there are so many kids in Vatican loves basketball, loves NBA. Why don't you come and organize a basketball camp here? So we organized a basketball camp. We, invited so many people, so many kids actually, and kids from all over, every religion, every color, and every culture. And I remember I had the basketball camp, and right after the basketball camp, and FBI, one of my friends on the FBI called me. And they were like, well, Turkey just put a bounty on your head and you need to, where are you? I was like, I'm in Vatican. They're like, what are you doing in Vatican? I was like, I'm doing a basketball camp. It's like, well, just come back to US immediately. It was very, very strange because my name was on most wanted terrorist list before, and they put my name on Interpol list with red notice, so they still consider me as an international criminal, And I even tweeted something and said, only thing I terrorize is the basketball rim. So after that bounty, it was very dangerous because when I had a conversation with some of my friends, they're like, well, in America, they cannot do anything, but outside of America, obviously, because of the bounty, because of the money, that is going to trigger many mafias, many even serial killers they were talking about and stuff. So I came to U.S. immediately, and they said, do not leave this country till the elections are over, And I had many, meetings with FBI and so many people in the Hill. I'm like, I'm not the only one. On that list, there are actually so many journalists, so many teachers, and so many innocent people who are on that most wanted list, and now Turkish government put a bounty on their head, So the one thing about the Turkish government is if you live in Turkey and if you say anything against the Turkish government, then you'll be in jail the next day, which there are so many examples of that. But if you're outside of Turkey, Turkey uses the Interpol uses their power to abuse Interpol system. So they put your name into Interpol system. I believe in one day they put over 60,000. It's actually on the internet, 60,000 people's name on the Interpol list. So they will try to get you back to Turkey. But I have not lived since. They put a bounty. Even in America, I can only go to certain places. Even if I want to go to a supermarket or a mall or to shop somewhere, I had to let either one of my friend or FBI know that I'm going there and stuff. So it is a very difficult situation. And so we're just waiting for the election to be over, and we are trying to get the bounty off people's head. It's been a very difficult situation.
Thank you, Enes. So I believe that some Republicans have offered support and are calling on the Biden administration to do something about it. To Dan, what kind of sanctions could be leveled against Turkey for this type of behavior?
Sure. So, there's a variety of things that, without even getting into, I'll focus on economic sanctions. So, as people may know, the United States has got a variety of laws that sanction foreign governments, foreign individuals, foreign organizations for a host of activities, including global acts of terrorism, actions that prevent the spread of democracy, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, narco-trafficking. We're in an environment where a series of administrations have been more open in regard to designating foreign governments, foreign political parties, foreign political leaders under our U.S. economic sanctions law, which is lawyer speak to say that the U.S. government has started, just take a quick step back, for years What we did in the United States is we embargoed whole countries. We said you can't do business with Iran, can't do business with Cuba, can't do business with a variety of countries. And after 9/11, we started to move to this concept of smart sanctions, that not only are we going to designate territories, we're going to start to list specific individuals, including foreign government officials, where U.S. persons cannot provide them a good, a service, or a technology, and where it's prohibited for a U.S. person to receive a good, a service, or a technology. We've done it to people in Putin's inner circle. We've certainly done it to members of the Chinese Communist Party. There are a variety of, and a host of terrorist organizations where we have specifically called out individuals for engaging in activities that are contrary to the national security interests of the United States, and essentially created an embargo that is specific to those individuals. All of that is on the table.
All right, that's good to know. Enes, you may not realize it, but you gave a big boost to a Middle East Forum campaign last year when you told the Washington Post that celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz would become a stooge for Erdogan if elected to the Senate. The Middle East Forum was the first to expose Oz's business and political ties to Turkey, which ended up becoming a major talking point in the GOP primaries in Pennsylvania. So my question to you is, did America dodge a bullet when it comes to Dr. Oz?
Big time. I mean, I was telling like all my friends and journalist friends or, politician friends, I'm like, listen, Dr. Oz is in Erdogan's pocket. He is going to do whatever Erdogan says. And I'm just glad that, he did not get elected, because if he would have, then it would be a very difficult situation, because Erdogan was going to have a voice in the Senate, and he was going to be one of the most important person in America. So yes, I mean, he was. I'm sure you guys heard about the relationship, the business relationship between Erdogan's family, I believe, and Dr. Oz and stuff. So yes, the U.S. definitely dodged a bullet for sure.
Thank you. Next question, I think, is on a lot of people's minds here. Sunday was a big day in Turkish politics.
Right.
For the first time, there was a united opposition facing Erdogan, and for a moment, it looked like he stood a legitimate chance of losing the presidential race. However, that wasn't the outcome. Polls seem to have got it wrong. He had a solid lead altogether, and it looks like we're running to a runoff.
Yeah.
What can we expect from this runoff election? And will Erdogan coast to victory, or will he have to pull out some of his tricks on the way?
Even in the first round, if there was fair or free election, he was going to lose. And I even posted like a lot of videos about how they were cheating in some of the cities. Even the opposition leader posted so many videos of that. How they were cheating the election pretty much. But people in Turkey has to decide if they want to live under a dictatorship or democracy. I mean, if you look at what Erdogan is doing for the last, 20 whatever years, Turkey actually is the #1 country in the world that put the most journalists in a jail. Literally, is more than, I believe, Russia and China, if the numbers didn't change, And it could have been a bridge of maybe East and West, but just because of Erdogan policies, it's impossible. There's no freedom of speech, no freedom of religion, no freedom of expression. So it is the people are. Many people are saying that. Even the Economist says that it is the most important election in 2023.
Right.
Because Turkey plays a very important role in the Middle East and Europe, and I just hope that it won't be too late for Turkey, because Turkey is a beautiful country. The problem is Erdogan, and Erdogan acted more Russia ally than American ally. He's going out there and buying S-400s, and he's going and shaking hands with people like like Putin or Iran and stuff. So I just hope that my country becomes a democratic again. So.
Well, I hope so too. You recently told Fox News that you may be considering a bid for higher office.
Yeah.
You said that you may run. Yes.
Well, the reason is because am not actually like a regular Turk. I open my arms to everyone. You know, I have many conversations with people from different backgrounds, different colors, and different religions. I even remember like, and I get a lot of actually death threats for it. I remember, you know, I was actually the second Turks that acknowledged the Armenian genocide. I cannot tell you guys how much death threats I got after putting that tweet out there, you know. Or I'm actually one of the only Turks that like opened his arm to Greek people, you know, or Kurds. So I grew up east side of Turkey. There was a lot of Kurds, you know. So I think we need a voice in a Congress or Senate that is going to stand with what's right, you know, and not gonna think about, oh, if I say this, what will be the outcome? No, just go out there and say the truth, you know. So I just hope that all the other Turks can realize that, you know, just it's important to stand for what's right.
So could you tell our very small and private audience here, I think you mentioned that you might, if you did decide to run, you might want to do it someplace warm.
Yes. So my whole life, if I look at my career, I went to college in Kentucky, freezing. I got drafted by Utah Jazz, same. Then I got traded to Oklahoma City, New York, Boston, Portland. So I was like, God, can you please like send me somewhere warm, you know? Send me where it's like sunshine and where it's like warm, you know? Well, I mean, I'm still considering where to run it, but I think Florida might be the place. You know, it's because Arizona might be it, but every time I go to Florida to play, obviously it's the Miami Heat. It's just like you wake up in a good mood and your bones are warm, you're just ready to go. You know what I mean? It's like let's go. But when you play in places like Portland, you open the curtains, it's dark and rainy, and you wake up depressed and stuff. But Florida might be, or Arizona. I did not think about Arizona actually. It could be a good one. But it's just too far from DC, you know. So,
Well,
yeah.
well, I think whatever the temperature is where you run, I think Senator Freedom has a nice ring.
I like that. I like that.
Okay, we're going to jump into some audience questions here in the last few minutes. Thank you, Marilyn. Okay. To Enes, do you think that activism had any impact on China's conduct with the Uyghurs, or is China impervious?
Well, I mean, I will just say this. I talk about the problems that are happening in Turkey for the last, 10 years, you know? And I remember having a conversation with one of the Uyghur activists. And how it started was I was doing a basketball camp. I took a picture with this kid, and his parent called me out in front of everybody and said, how can you call yourself a human rights activist when your Muslim brothers and sisters are getting tortured and raped every day in concentration camp in China? And I was just so shocked. I turned around to that parent. I was like, I promise I'm going to get back to you. So I had a conversation with my manager. I was like, I need you to find me a concentration camp survivor. And he found me one. It was a lady. We sit down and had a conversation, and she was telling me about all the torture methods and all the forced sterilization and abortion, and she was telling me about all the gang raping. I don't want to go into too much details, but I was like, this is just unacceptable, because we talk about all the human rights violations around the world, but the biggest one is pretty much happening right now in China. 2-3 million Muslims are in concentration camps and getting tortured and raped every day. And when you talk about China, I just didn't know that the power they have on America, actually. You know, I didn't know that they pretty much run NBA, Hollywood, Wall Street, academias, big tech, farmland, and I can just go on, you know. And when you talk about when more people watch NBA games in China than American population last year, you know, so it's a $5 billion contract. So you say anything against the Chinese government, you'll be out of the league the next day, which that happened. So.
This next question comes from Art. He asks, have you received any support from the NBA or NBA players in your efforts?
You know, it was, when I talk about the problems were happening in China, it was a perfect moment because it was right before the Beijing Olympics. So forget about the NBA, I try to reach out to everyone, NFL, MLB, MLS, NH. Forget about America, I try to reach out to Olympians. I was like, listen, this is bigger than sports. So just join me, let's create this movement, because while we are dribbling the ball on the other side of the world, people are losing their loved ones, losing their lives, and losing their homes, you know? They said, listen, we love you, Enes. I think what you're doing is so amazing, so inspirational. We support you, but we just cannot do it out loud. I asked them why. They said, well, we have shoe deals, endorsement deals. We want to get another contract. I asked them one simple question. I said, put yourself in their shoes. If your mother, if your sister, if your daughter was in those concentration camps getting tortured and raped every day, would you still pick money and business over your morals, values, and principles? They usually turn around and leave the room, you know? And it just breaks my heart to see these millionaires, which signs $200 and $300 million 5-year contract. It's still bowing down to dictatorships. It just blows my mind, especially like they have contracts with like companies like Nike, you know, which preaches about, you know, Black Lives Matter, no Asian hate, LGBTQ community, Latino community in America, but everybody knows about the slave labor and sweatshops in China, you know? So it does break my heart to see my colleagues and all the athletes out there just bowing down. Not only you see actors and whatever, but someone had to open that door, so.
Yeah. For Enes, we're going to ask another one for Enes. Where in Turkey did you grow up, and how do you view the Fethullah Gulen and his movement?
So I grew up east side of Turkey, the city called Van, where there are a lot of Kurds, Armenians, where there are lots of people from different backgrounds and different religions. The person you mentioned, Fethullah Gulen, so I actually went to his school. The crazy thing is they were given the best education, the schools. Even Erdogan's, I believe, son and daughter went to prep schools of Mr. Gulen, you know? So it's that crazy. Now he's like the #1 enemy. So this movement believes that we have a lot of problems are happening in our century because of uneducated people. So this movement, the Gulen movement, instead of going out there and building mosques, he believes in education. He believes in raising generations. So he goes around and builds schools, dormitories, universities, and this movement have schools and dialogue centers and cultural centers over 170 countries in the world. When I met him for the first time, I asked him, like, give me an advice. He said, it doesn't matter what your religion, your background, your skin color, or whoever you are. The most important thing in life is leave your differences on the table and trying to find what we have in common. Because we only have one world to live, so we need to make this world better together. So with the Gulen movement, the Erdogan blames the Gulen movement for the coup attempt, you know, in 2016. Not many people knows, but the night of the coup attempt, I was actually sitting down with Mr. Gulen in the same room, you know? So I saw what he did with my own eyes. He was literally sitting on his chair and praying for Turkey. And literally 2 hours later, Erdogan came out and blamed the Gulen movement for the coup attempt. And I was like, this is unacceptable. I'm gonna go out there and tell everyone about it. I came to DC, I went to Senate, and all the senators were like, we know why you're here, but you didn't even have to come. Because one of them said, if you want to understand who did the coup attempt, you have to look at the benefits of the coup attempt. And after the coup attempt in Turkey, Erdogan pretty much took over military, took over judiciary, police, media. He shut down so many media outlets and put innocent journalists in jail. So it has been a very difficult time for Turkey, but yes, I know Mr. Gulen really well.
Thank you, Enes. Dan, a question here asks, do you see the difference in prosecution of FARA against Republicans, conservatives, and Trump supporters or aides? Any sort of politicized prosecutions with use of FARA?
Well, that's an interesting question. So obviously, the fare registration unit's position is that they're apolitical, both domestically and in regard to which country is specifically being investigated. I actually have a lot of confidence in regard to the people in the fare registration unit. I do think that they try to get it right. I think, and speaking about the kind of the career prosecutors at FARA, that they're attempting to take their jobs very seriously and do so on an apolitical basis. So Democrat versus Republican, maybe I'll pass on that one. In regard to the registration unit, will also say that they treat all countries equally. And I would respectfully disagree. The idea that perhaps involvement of a German nonprofit would be treated the exact same way as a Chinese nonprofit right now, it could happen, but I don't think that's where the smart money is. I think there are certainly areas, certain countries that are of specific concern, right? That there are countries that have been clearly identified who are involved in kind of information campaigns that are done through essentially saying that it's charitable money being dispersed, but it is essentially a public relations campaign in an attempt to influence U.S. public perceptions in regard to our foreign relations with those countries. So domestic politics, I think they try and stay away from as much as possible. In regard to different countries out there, the law is neutral, but there are clearly countries that are of larger concern to them.
Thank you, that makes sense. Okay, our next question here, which I'm going to answer myself, it asks, if possible, please share some strategies and policies MEF uses to recruit and retain an activist to carry on MEF objectives and goals. We've been, we've experienced this. I was the head of the Islamism and Politics Project in the Counter-Islamist Grid. We dealt with both professional and volunteer activists at this time. Really, one of the strongest ways to do that, I think, is reaching out to different coalition groups that MEF works with. We're a traditional think tank. Our strength is in the policies that we offer to policymakers or people even in the private sector. But since we are so strong at building allies, we've sort of adopted some of those groups, some of those ethnic and religious communities, and they've become part of our built-in constituency, whether it be Iranian Americans, Armenian Americans, Turkish-Americans. So that's been a real strength for us, and it's allowed us to grow quite a bit, and that's where we've taken a lot of our activism recruitment lately. Okay, so let's see here. Enes Freedom, is there any real possibility that Erdogan will lose the election?
Good question. Well, if there is a free and fair election, yes, he will lose. I mean, think about this. Like 7 parties came together to literally just go against one guy. And they're saying enough is enough. We are just sick of his policy. We are sick of what he's doing to country or the countries around Turkey. But I mean, if there is fair election, when I had a conversation with people in White House, senators, congressmen, or whoever, they all said the same thing. If there is a fair election, yes, he will lose, but he is not. That there's a reason he's blocking the international observers, so he could just cheat as he wants. But it is going to be tough because May 28th is maybe like one of the most important day for in Turkish history and maybe in Middle East too. But I mean, I don't want to say I don't see no hope, but it is going to be very tough.
So, I mean, Erdogan definitely has the media on his side. Is there any free press in Turkey that will report negatively on Erdogan
Well, they do, but they are in jail, so they cannot tweet or they cannot talk from the jails. But no, it breaks my heart because, we just be talking about one of the most modern Muslim country in the world. It was, but now like all the journalists you talk about is in jail. All the opposition leaders, like the HDP, the Selahattin Demirtas, he is in jail for years just because of he was one of the leaders that could actually go against Erdogan. Many other leaders are actually in the jail, but no, there's definitely not freedom of speech. I mean, look at what actually the craziest thing is that I don't know if you guys seen it recently, but there was actually a couple of journalists who are outside of Turkey were literally exposing the Erdogan's regime on Twitter. And Erdogan, the Turkish government, called Elon Musk and said, we want you to block these accounts. And if you don't, then we are going to ban the whole app in Turkey. And unfortunately, Elon did it because he's a businessman and he does care about his money. And I think he has a lot of projects about with SpaceX or Tesla in Turkey. And a lot of people are like, you preach about free speech in America, but when it comes to a dictatorship, pretty much, you go with it. And you literally just listen to them and block accounts and stuff. And it is unacceptable. They literally are threatening Elon Musk and Twitter and saying, if you don't listen to what we have to say, we're going to ban the whole app. It became a huge news right before the election.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much to our panelists, Enes and Dan. Thank you for your insightful answers.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.